Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, back on the Investigative Journal. It's already Tuesday, September 5th. The month is flying by, and I know you came back today to listen to the Investigative Journal to finish up what I started yesterday, and that's telling you that on your Labor Day, you're really just nothing but a slave, and most people don't even know it. You're not even an American citizen as you think you are. You're a corporate citizen, an indentured slave, and you have very little say about anything about it. And they took care of that right after the Civil War. And in fact, what's going on now in the country regarding these race relations is all orchestrated by the Vatican-led New World Order. And what they're doing is wanting to erase all of American history, start over again. But you know, the thing is, people are going down, tearing down all of these Confederate statues. And really, they have no idea what the Civil War was all about. And I mean, you might as well tear down the whole country, because if you don't really do your homework, there's no reason to do any of this. I mean, there's no reason. It's part of your history. You're not responsible. Your ancestors were, right? That doesn't mean you're racist just because you were born in the South or you live in Alabama now and you're a white person. You didn't have anything to do with what was going on back then. And you black people out there who are being, incited into this by false information by the Jesuit order ought to wake up. Because right after the Civil War, you know something? You thought that, because now you're going to get equal rights. You were treated worse after that. Ripped off by all of these charlatans who you had no idea how to deal with these people. And Lincoln and other people wanted to protect you and ease you into this.
There's a ship available, the USS Sword.
No, did you hear that just start out of nowhere? It just, all of a sudden, the internet's getting so obtrusive. These videos will just appear now. The commercials, they'll just show up and start playing on your computer. I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me a lot lately. Well, anyway, getting back to the 14th Amendment. What I'm getting at is, once that was, and I did the whole show yesterday, kind of legally explaining it. Once they passed that, it was, first of all, never ratified. It's unconstitutional. All of us became slaves, black and white, red, no matter who you are. You're not even an American citizen. You're a citizen to the corporate United States. And when you get your birth certificate, it's nothing more than a bill of lading, and you're nothing more than an object. And then they use you as collateral for the debt. You're worth so much money to them, black, white, or whatever. And in the discussion I had yesterday, there was a clause that kind of relieved people from this obligation that's never been told to you. But the question is, how do you relieve yourself from citizenship to this corporate state? And if you go back to some of my old interviews with a guy by the name of Terry Lee, we discussed it in depth. And I kind of agree with him. It's not just something like you can write a piece of paper to the Queen or to the government stating you don't want to be a corporate citizen anymore. They've got you lock, stock, and barrel into contracts already. As soon as you're born, and if you take any kind of government help, there's another chain you have to break. So you have to break if you think of it as, just think of the chains around you are basically all these contracts from the time you get that birth certificate to the present day, no matter how old you are. You're constantly getting locked into their system. And if you don't break all of those things, one of those links will keep you connected. And what I mean is, no Social Security, no driver's license. You can't do anything. The banking, you have to change your banking habits. You have to then do a number of different things to break the chains of citizenship, and it's not easy. And I've only known a few people that have successfully done it and have become basically a sovereign citizen of their state. So if you wanted to learn more about that, you can contact me at gregbeacon@gmail.com, or you can Google Greg Interviews Terry Lee. You can get some of my old shows, and you'll see that it's not as simple as just stating, hey, I don't want to be a corporate citizen anymore. Well, anyway, because they figured this out. They realized they got to keep you an indentured slave without you even wearing chains now. They can do it through all of their little sneaky little legal and lawyer maneuvers. But anyway, I wanted to talk about a forgotten clause. And this is from an article done by L.C. Lyons. And then we'll get on to a whole bunch of things. There's a big health outbreak in San Diego going on now. I don't know if you heard about it. Then we got a monster hurricane now poised to hit the East Coast. It could always veer up north and deflect, but I don't know. And this is interesting because it's going to be right around September 10th or 11th. Could this be the next 9/11? And they're talking, I've listened to all the mainstream forecasts, and there's models coming from Europe, and there's all these. And I'm tracking a number of them, and they're cautious, but they're saying, hey, this is a huge storm. It's already a Category 4. But we're talking in certain models where and the mainstream's not getting there yet, where it could get to a Category 7. I mean, they've been tracking the waves at the center of the eye wall at 52 feet high with a lag time of 16 seconds. So they're hitting every 16 seconds. Okay, that's when the wave goes up and then it comes down again. And then that 16 seconds again it hits. So that's huge. And it could build even stronger. So it's called the Cape Verde storm, which has brought some of the biggest storms to the United States. Hugo was one. And there were a couple other I can't remember. But watch that. That's a huge story coming up in the next week or so. Also want to talk about that health outbreak in San Diego. And I want to do everything flat today. Right after I finish this forgotten clause, I've got a nice little presentation I want to play for you on the surface of the earth. And I'm going to talk about a couple things prior to that that you must go and check out for yourself. Now, this forgotten clause in the 14th Amendment, it's a treacherous act by Congress. And many people, Andrew Johnson was totally against it, and he was impeached. Lincoln was killed, and that was for a number of reasons. One was this story we're talking about now. And nobody gets in the way of these people. And they're steamrolling you now. Oh, the big story I wanted to talk about is some inside information on these Walmarts now. You've heard that story. It's been around for a while. But they're going full bore now in certain Walmarts. One in Midland, Texas, where a guy who worked for these contractors tells some horrific tales about what they're really doing inside there. And they're telling you it's a plumbing problem, but there's Walmarts cropping up all over, and they're really going to be used as FEMA camps. And that's another story we'll get to later in the week. But obviously, this forgotten clause the whole 14th Amendment was a treacherous act. It's taking away the sovereignty of America, taking away the power of the states. Now, remember, how many of you out there really think your sheriff is really important? Most people don't. They look to the federal government now. It's kind of like, oh, the bigger they are, the more important they are. Well, really, our country was formed in the county. The county sheriff was more important than the state and the federal government because he was close to his county, knew what he wanted. And without his permission, the feds and the state couldn't enter. But now that's completely changed. And isn't it interesting that, that Sheriff Joe Arpaio was totally against legal immigration in Arizona, And he was at odds with the global New World Order, and they finally they got him on some kind of federal charge of, what was it, lying in court or something, or denying a court order. And so they were going to sentence him to prison. The guy said in the 70s. He's a good guy, really. And Trump stepped in and pardoned him. And so that's an interesting story going on. But the sheriffs no longer have that power. And anyway, but this treacherous act by Congress was enough to have all of them should have been hung as traitors. They took away the rights of people, and they made it seem like they were doing some really good thing for both blacks and whites at the time, and it wasn't. But there was one more act of treachery that has been overlooked by most people. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, and Elsie Lyon points this out to us. It reads as follows. The validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized. The validity authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection and rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the U.S., or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave. But all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. You know, at that time, she says, a hue and cry was raised concerning Lincoln's promises to forgive the South's debts as part of the Reconstruction, with good reason. But mainly overlooked was the first part of Section 4, which says that the debts incurred by the U.S. government were not to be questioned, that the enforcers whom the government hired to quell insurrection, today that being the CIA, FBI, DATF, DEA, U.S. Marshals, etc., would be paid by the government. And where was the government's money to come from? Answer, its newly acquired subjects. The U.S. slave corporate citizen. The states had just signed into a constitutional amendment the permission for the federal government to hire thugs and thieves to control us, to pay them with our own money, and that no question could be brought to court about the constitutionality of these actions. This is why any effort to bring a suit against the government about the federal debt will never be entertained by the Supreme Court. Never, never, never. So anyway, it's a dangerous game, you know. She says, in Europe, Africa, and other places, guess what? A despot simply took over a country by waging war. Here in America, however, as long as Americans were armed and prepared for hostile armed takeover, the conspirators knew that a different technique, a grand deception by manipulation of laws, the courts, the schools, the media, must be employed to obtain the same result. They waged war on us long ago. That's why I said, you know, you people really need to understand the Vatican's role in this country from even prior in the 1600s all the way down to today. What they've done with connections to their puppet government leaders is just horrendous. And everybody gives them a free pass. I mean, there's no hope for understanding. You know, I really get disgusted sometimes with people because they're always trying to figure things out, but they never go to the heart of the story or the root cause. And in this case, when you're talking about what's happening in our country today, if you don't include the historical and go through, you're not going to get it in your history books. You got to do some digging. You're never going to understand the story. And then it even gets deeper. I am really disgusted with people who, especially Christians, a lot of Christians, and I'll just say it as it is. I get into these arguments, not arguments, but almost it's as if what I say isn't important, and only thing is important if you tell me what to read and tell me that I'm not saved, or if I don't say a prayer today, I'm a doomed human being. Well, you know, there's things you want to talk about here. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I've taken your advice, but now you take my advice. Look, if you really, I get into these arguments, well, Genesis states that the Earth is stationary, but it's still round. It's still a sphere. And, it's ridiculous because you're just still ingrained in that idea before, as soon as you were born, before you could think, and when you went to kindergarten or even that, they stuck a globe in your hand and told you all of their Nassau lies. If you were born in the 1800s, you'd have been smarter than you are today, at least about what you live on. And let me just finish that, and I'm going to get back to, because I got a nice little flat earth presentation I want to do today. But let me just say this. Why, if you think that, then you're believing what the serpent, what Nassau is telling you. Look at their logo. That's a serpent's tongue coming out of there. So if you take part of what they believe, that's as good as taking it all. And at least look into it. But then I hear from Christians, oh, it really doesn't matter. How's it going to affect me? How's it going to affect you? They've changed your reality. You're siding with the beast. That's why I think the story is important. At least I'm going to leave this place convinced. They lied. They deceived me on the most important thing, the ground I walk on. Well, anyway, let me finish the 14th Amendment. So we got people need to wake up, but they don't see the whole picture. They waged war on us a long time ago, but we've been too naive to see it. This is Elsie Lyons talking. There are many who are waking up now, but they don't see the whole picture. They think that if they reverse a certain portion of the government abuse, we can take our country back. She's talking about similar to just what I said, but in a different vein. Tax protesters, as IRS calls them, have perfectly correct reasons to point out that they are not required to file. But they forget they are still U.S. corporate subjects. See, that's the point I'm trying to make. Homeschoolers fight bravely for the right to protect their children against government control, but they forget they are still corporate subjects, bound by contracts that you've entered either, silence in absentia. If you don't, say anything, you're guilty. But anyway, homeschoolers fight bravely, but they forget they're still corporate bound. Legal eagles have found many statutory loopholes to win a few battles in court, but they forget they are still U.S. corporate bound citizens, playing the patriot game without fully understanding the constitutional hold that the federal government has on you. Is a dangerous game, very dangerous. And many people are set up and then they come down hard if they don't play it right. Terry Lee, the guy I interviewed years ago, played it right and they don't touch him at all. And there's a number of things you must do. Oh yeah, you're going to have to face your accusers in court. But there's a way to do it. They may, in a few skirmishes, these patriots, in their battles with the government, they may win a few to encourage us to continue wasting our energies in useless effort. That's what I agree with her on that. But they will never win the war and will only bring the wrath of government down upon the head of yet another one of its subjects. For now, at least, she says, the government is respecting the status of American inhabitants. Now, we, she says, Elsie Lyon, and writer George Sibley have not had any legal hassles from the government entity because we are no longer U.S. citizens. Well, let me try to figure this out. I want to know how she did that. And I think I'll email her and find out if she's still around. We are the same as George Washington. Oh, boy, here we go. Now, see, I don't really agree here because she has no idea that Washington, Jefferson, and Franklin all were playing the game with the Vatican. Any U.S. citizen can give up this enslaving status at any time, but it must be done properly. Okay, I want to know what properly is from her point of view. I showed what I thought was proper, and I haven't found anything else. If everyone in America were to take back their rights, though revocation process, the government would have no more subjects. So, I'd like to see what she did, and I'll find out for you. Okay, enough on the 14th Amendment. Now, Here we go. A flat Earth. Why is it important? Because don't you want to know exactly what you're living on? I mean, even if you're never going to use it, I mean, how many of us are going to go into the stratosphere? Get 50,000 feet above the Earth, 10 miles. No, 99.9% we can't afford it, right? I'd go if we could afford it. Well, how many are going to, even if you, let's just say it is a globe, how many are going to walk around it? Never. And if it's flat, how many of us are ever going to have the ability, the money, the fortitude to get to the end, to see that ice wall, that barrier, and keep going? None of us. So why is it important? Well, it's important because they're spending billions of dollars lying to you. It's a deception. They have no proof. Anything they've done over the years is all pseudoscience. Now, I recommend, before you say, oh, Greg, you're crazy, it's not important, I've got better things, go read Psalms 21 and shut up, Greg, about the flat Earth. I don't want to be disturbed about it. My system of thinking can't handle that. Well, that's exactly what I used to run into when I first brought up the Jesuits in this country, and then slowly people caught on, at least some, and realized that, if you just do enough homework, make up your own mind. I don't care if you die thinking the Earth is round. I really don't. But maybe afterwards you'll see the difference. When you go floating up there, look down, and I guarantee you won't see a curve. But anyway, in 1931, a scientist, engineer, physicist, Auguste Piccard, went up in a balloon with another gentleman, and they had a capsule. And he was the first one who could figure out how to breathe in that kind of environment, because once you get to 30,000 feet, you can't. I mean, and he had to keep the capsule heated. And he came up with all those things, and those were some of the first balloon capsule flights. Well, what he did is he ended up going, and all of his instruments were checked, and he ended up going about 50,000 feet up into the air in the stratosphere. And he was up there a long time. They took him for dead, but he ended up getting back, and he landed on he was from, I believe he was from Sweden, somewhere up there, and he ended on an iceberg, and they were alive. So he recounted everything, and he did a magazine interview in 1931 and categorically stated, without question, that it appears to be a flat surface from that distance with upturned ridges. And that basically was from a man who saw from 50,000 feet. Now, there have been a couple flights recently. One, he didn't have a GoPro fisheye lens. Now, if you go up to 50,000 feet or even go 30,000 and take one of your GoPro lenses, and when you're up in an airplane and you got a pretty good view, take a picture. Now, I guarantee it won't look like what you're looking at with your eyes. Because when I go up 30,000 feet in an airplane, I see nothing. I don't see any curve. When Piccard was up there at 50,000 feet, he didn't see any curve either. And those GoPro lenses automatically curve. So we're going to talk about that and get to this a little presentation on the flat Earth for the second half hour. I just do want to mention about that San Diego outbreak. It's a health outbreak that just occurred there, and I'll bring that up in the second half hour. And then, of course, this week we're going to have a lot to talk about. Hurricane Irma, North Korea. Boy, Walmarts are turning into FEMA camps. It's all coming down pretty quick, isn't it? Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour. I did want to get to the health emergency going on in San Diego right now. And you know that I used to live there. I still have a boat there, and now I've decided to take up residence in Mexico. And I found really no difference when I lived in San Diego or Chula Vista, outside of maybe some of the conveniences or the difference in the roads, all those things. But as far as people, there were more Spanish people there than I see here. There's more Americans here, and kind of flip-flopping, huh? Anyway, this ultra-liberal city, San Diego, incidentally, it's inundated with illegal aliens, is facing a health crisis. And authorities have declared a public health emergency. I didn't realize this. It just happened. It was declared Friday. An outbreak of hepatitis A that has been linked to at least 15 deaths and 400 hospitalizations. The liver disease outbreak started last November, with the homeless population affected most. The emergency declaration will help the city access state funds and provide legal protection for new sanitation measures, the Union Tribune reported. Areas with high concentrations of homeless people will receive roughly 40 portable hand washing stations to help combat the disease, which can spread through fecal matter, and people fail to thoroughly clean their hands after using the restroom. Now, crews also plan to use bleach spike water for high-pressure washing to remove all feces, blood, body fluids, or contaminated surfaces, according to sanitation planners. Other cities in the region can expect to see similar outbreaks, Fox News reported, said Dr. Wilma Wooten. So anyway, here we go. And they get on this thing after vaccination and educational programs failed. Okay, let's not go there. But anyway, yeah, San Diego's a tough city. I mean, there's so many beautiful areas of it, but the high concentrations of homeless around the inner part of downtown San Diego, certain spots like down by the fishing wharf. And I had some interesting experiences there. People sleeping all over the place. And then what happens is, then they come by with their truck and they give them food. Then they move them around. They take them somewhere else and they let them sleep in another area. And you'll see these little towns, these little homeless places growing up, and homeless villages kind of on the side of the road, by the fishing docks. I mean, I remember one time I was on my fishing boat there, and it was early in the morning. I got off to walk my dogs. It's about 7 in the morning, and this guy's in the parking lot naked, screaming. And I said to him, hey, man, put your clothes on. And he was high. And he said, I have the right to walk around any way I want. I said, yeah, but there's going to be kids here in a little while. Don't you have any courage? You can't tell me what to do. And I got 2 big dogs, so he wasn't going to do anything. I had Max, my Malamute, with me. But anyway, one of the older women who worked on the boats came up, and she just leveled him and said, get your butt out of here before and she called the police. And at that, I was taking my garbage out, and you open up kind of an area. It's a big, it's kind of got 4 walls and a big door so people can't go in and take the garbage, and you have a key because you have your boat there. So I opened it up, and I throw my garbage in, and he runs in there and hides behind the garbage can, the big, huge garbage container. I said, come on, man, I got to lock it. You'll be in here as a prisoner. So what I did is I closed the door. I didn't lock it. I left it open so he could get out of there. I wasn't going to do that. But anyway, I walked away, and about 5 minutes later, the police came and took him away. So that's what you're dealing with sometimes. I mean, it's a very, very sad situation. It doesn't have to be this way in America, but the Jesuit, Vatican-led New World Order want it this way. And we're not going to change it unless we understand it. Okay, flat earth, we got to get to it. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to listen to what this gentleman named Mike Cavanaugh has to say. And I'm looking at a group of chimpanzees, monkey. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it's amazing, the picture, because they each, through their eyes, they have a different personality. Now, the first monkey, or chimpanzee, is kind of overlooking another's head, and he's kind of curious. The second one is looking off serious at something to his right. The third one, in the middle kind of, is just looking at the camera. The fourth one seems a little taken back. The fifth one is kind of going, oh, that's pretty. He's got a personality. And the sixth one looks like he's just dreaming the most beautiful thoughts. So they have their own little personalities. No, that's not uncommon for animals. Birds have it. I mean, I had parrots. They have their personalities. Dogs have their personalities. Horses. But I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think you come from monkeys or not? Now, I know most Christians are going to say, and they have really researched the evolutionary process, and will say no. Okay. Now, what about the age of the earth? Now, I've listened to both sides of the story, some saying it's billions of years old, and they present these facts and artifacts, and that people have been around for 100,000 years. And then, of course, I've listened to the Christian and Seventh-day Adventists talk a lot about it, and I've really researched it, and they say that the Bible says that it's only 4,000 or 5,000 years old, give or take, whatever, and that man hasn't been around that long. Now, what do you think? Now, I bet you, if you're a Christian or not a Christian, you've done a lot of research at it, right? And you've come to your conclusions based on facts that you understand. That's fine. But now what about the size and shape and what's going on in the earth? Now, do you think it's a ball? A sphere? Or do you think it's a flat surface? And it's different than NASA's been telling you. And I bet 90% of you don't do the research because you don't think it's important. Well, I think it's vitally important because all the other things I talked about are really what we're talking about, really what we're looking at here. Now, if you don't understand exactly what the surface is, how can you say it's 4 million years old, or how can you say it's only 4,000 years old? And if you think that you understand whether you came from monkeys or not, monkeys and people walk on this earth. So if you don't clearly understand what you're walking on, how can you make that decision? Well, anyway, I'll leave that up to you. But let's listen to what Mike Cavanaugh has to say about what he calls an absolute must-see. Well, you got a must-hear. Here we go.
Since the beginning of the Flat Earth Awakening, there have been many attempts to model the motions of the heavens on top of flat projections. He gave us the circular model, the square model,
okay, I'll add some things here. He shows you pictures.
And other projections like the diamond. All have failed so far to make an accurate and verifiable model that shows what is actually going on up there.
Okay,
it is our research, modeling, and experiments that have made it very clear to us that all current models are wrong. The main reason for that is because they all start with the wrong premise that the tropics form the actual paths of a physical object like the sun or moon.
You see, I like this because he's presenting maybe something new. I don't know, I'm just asking questions.
Most flat earthers also have very little hands-on experience in astronomy and proper experiments, which led to an immense pile of incorrect assumptions and false claims regarding their model commitment and bias towards their current held beliefs. To show in a simple way that the sun, for example, is not a physical object, we have measured the disk size of the sun when it moved directly overhead. That result ended up in a 39.8 mile diameter sun. That is a very small object compared to the size of the Earth. If you use that size on any projection on dates like the equinoxes, when almost everybody has a sunrise at 90 degrees east, you will soon find out that most azimuth angles will never work with an object that close and small. If you take any flat projection and place the small sun on the equator on the equinox and place yourself at sunrise, on almost all latitudes, the sun is directly east of your position. If you were able to move north or south in seconds from top to bottom, that small object will remain fixed at its azimuth angle on the horizon, which by rule of geometry makes it impossible to be a small physical object. This led us to do more research into the properties of the sun and its behavior in the sky. We have come across so many false claims and highly questionable ideas about the motion of the sun and moon and stars that we find it's our duty to correct these claims. Some claim the sun moves in straight lines, which is a false claim as shown in the following images.
I guess you're going to have to go to this to check it out. He's presenting some new information, or at least some things I haven't heard.
And it can be verified by tracking the speed of the sun on its azimuth and declination in a 12-hour time span.
And the only way we're really going to know is if we ask questions from everyone that puts their 2 cents in, right? And not be afraid.
There have also been claims that the sun moves in a circular path, which is also incorrect.
If it disagrees even with your flat earth theory. Now, I'm not saying what he's saying is right or wrong. I don't know what is right or wrong here.
Although, when you go to see the Arctic midnight sun, it gives the impression of a circular path, since any observer has to rotate a full 360 degrees to follow the sun. But also with a circular path, you end up with the same problems with regards to sun angles on any given day of the year.
So what is the sun, Mike?
The hyperbolic paraboloid shape of the sun panorama is not just a path over a year time span.
He's getting pretty technical here. He's showing a bunch of things I can't
But that same
understand.
motion is
You'll have to
found
watch
in the
it.
sun's 24-hour cycle.
The point I'm trying to make is we have to put all the information in before we can
This
really
drift
understand.
pattern becomes obvious when you track the sun with high-end trackers like Los Mondi trackers, and just track the azimuth of the sun and do not use the correction adjustments of the tracker so that it runs on its nominal speed of 15 degrees an hour. The drift pattern is also equal and opposite on both sides of the equator, which means that this small 39.8 mile diameter sun is moving across the sky at various observed speeds north and south of the equator. After 2 years of research and modeling, we were stuck and couldn't make it work to model the sun or any object accurately. We started from scratch again. After looking at photos of crepuscular rays of the sun, which all flat earthers have seen a million times, we came to a revelation many, if not all, flatheads have overlooked. When you look at crepuscular rays piercing through clouds over a lake or plain, for example, the angles of the rays end up at the actual light source, which is just above the clouds in most cases. But we know the sun is not right above the clouds. We started wondering what someone would see looking back from the other side, and if he or she would see the same thing. Imagine a scenario where you see these rays over a lake. Those rays are lighting up a spot on the water. another observer right across the lake looking back at you. Can he see those rays in that lit up spot on the water like in this animation? Let's take that one step further and give the primary observer seeing the rays a long pole with a mirror attached at the end. If he were to reflect that ray hitting the water to the observer on the other side, would he then see a reflection of the sun in that mirror? Keep in mind the distance apart here is only 40 kilometers, and where the sun should be for the observer on the other side.
He's getting pretty heavy here, but I'm trying to follow it.
To make these light angles in 3D software, you will need, like we used here, a local light source. But in reality, when you move to the other side of the lake and turn around to look back, you will have the sun at your back. Therefore making it impossible to see the rays in the first scenario or the reflection of the sun in the mirror. We have therefore come to the logical conclusion that those rays are personal for any observer, as someone looking back cannot see the same thing because of his position towards the sun. Now, if those rays are personal and cannot be seen by anyone else but the observer himself, that indicates that the sun is a personal or local objective projection. This can be verified by anyone by doing the opposite side crepuscular rays experiment, like in this animation, and see that someone looking back at someone seeing those rays cannot and will not see the same thing.
Okay, so what he's trying to do here, just because I've studied this, the crepuscular rays coming through the clouds, is always been research to say, well, the sun cannot be billions of miles away. It has to be very close. Now, what he's doing is going even deeper into this, very technical stuff, coming to a conclusion that may be a little bit different than most flat earthers even come to. But what I'm trying to show you, whether you believe that the earth is flat, or you don't want to discuss it, or you have no interest in it, it's an important subject, and the deeper you go into it, the better chance we are to understand what really is going on. And I don't think we can be sure of what's above us, what's around us, and what's below us. Now, the reason is that a lot of the flat earthers don't have the resources to really get to the truth, and they're on the right track. And NASA is a deceptive organization that's lying. Now, the facts are this. We don't know what lies above. We know there are no satellites. We know the space station is a hoax. We know we never went to the moon. So we really don't know what's up there. We know what's 50,000 feet up, 10 miles into the stratosphere, because we've been there. But we don't know what's above that. And as far as what's around us, we know that there is a barrier, and that has been even tracked by ancient mariners. Thus, all of the maps that you see, the flat earth maps. But we don't know what's beyond that. Now, we do know that expeditions by the Navy back in the 50s by Admiral Byrd say that there was a landmass over one of the barriers that stretched even farther than the United States, bigger than the United States. But we don't know more than that. Now, we do know that Picard went up in 1931 and saw and looked and said, no, this is a flat surface with upridge barrier, upridge barriers. We know that. Now, what's below us? Oh, NASA lies and gives you those pictures of the core and the magna and the center of the earth. They don't know. What we do know is that they've went down. The farthest that we've ever drilled is about 7 miles deep. So that's about all we have. And it's an area of exploration ripe for a lot of things, ripe for what this guy's doing, in that he's trying to say, okay, these corpuscular rays show that the sun is not the big object that NASA tells us. It's not as far away. But what really is it? Can we be sure from what flat earthers, researchers have said? But because, look, the more we understand, the more we dig into it, the more we're going to find out. And we've got certain things now that we do know based on what facts, small facts we have. But we're always dealing against a propaganda machine like NASA, who decided to take over control of everything in the 50s. Before that, can you imagine if they weren't here? We'd probably know so much more. And what do they know they're not telling us? That's the whole key. So that's why I say it's important that you really keep your mind open on this subject. Not so much from the fact that you might not think it's important. You know, take that analogy of the monkeys. I mean, I could say the same thing. What's the difference if I came from a monkey or not? You know, but I know the truth on that. And I know we didn't. But anyway, I take the same approach with the flat earth. It's very important. I want to know what I'm stepping on. It's that simple. It's very simple. When you go walking on the sand, I want to know. And the only way you're going to know is if you do as much research as you can and rely on the resources that you have and look for people that are doing the same thing. And so we have that age-old question of why are we here? What are we living for? Where are we? And I think the subject of whether the earth is flat, what the sun is really like, all the different things that involved in this research, what lies behind those ice barriers, is vital. It's really interesting because they have shut down all of them. Imagine if we used that $92 billion a year to really understand these things. But they can't have it because they have this satanic idea that the sun, they worship the sun. That all comes from that. And that's the depressing thing about it. And control. And they play, can you imagine the laughing when you're, looking at the ball, spinning it and going, putting your finger there as a child. Oh, I think I'm going to go wherever my finger lands. We've all played that game. Well, when we get older, we realize how they're really laughing at us. Well, I'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. And keep it flat.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.